What was your biggest frick it, I'm doing this moment? Skipping days during a work conference to go to Disney World and Universal. No way in heck was I getting a free pass to Florida and not going to the wizarding world of Harry Potter. It was worth every second. A few days ago I had the opportunity to get LASIK. I just had to call out of work. This upset my boss, but frick it 4 days later, and I'm already 20 over 20. Called my wife and told her I had a drinking problem. Hard motherfucking phone call to make, I tell you what. Of course she already knew, most did, but getting it out there verbally was hard. Real hard. I'd also like to thank Topo Chico Bubbly Water for satisfying my need to drink cold bubbly drinks and need to be holding a beverage urges. Sober and hydrated. 1.5 years. Was going through some domestic violence BS and wasn't allowed to leave the home for months at a time. They tried to joke me to my demise, yelled at me a lot, etc. I can't remember all of it. My grandmother had died, and I'm pretty sure it was the intent to get me and get my part of the inheritance. The inheritance money finally came in after about 6 months of this treatment, and while the other person took his half and went on vacation, I took my half and bought a Greyhound ticket and got out of there. Best decision I ever made. Bought a sailboat. Quit a decent paying job that I hated. Sailed from New York to the Caribbean where I hung out for a year, then sold the boat back in Florida, and then spent the next 5 months hiking the Appalachian Trail. Went back to work for a year and now I'm currently backpacking through Southeast Asia for the next 6 months. I was a flight nurse at a company who liked firing people. We were transporting a patient from a car accident who became pulseless. Per policy we were meant to go to the closest hospital. Our closest hospital was 9 minutes away. However, this hospital was tiny and couldn't care for our patient. 13 minutes away was a trauma hospital. Our patient was dead and statistically speaking was going to stay that way, but his only hope was the trauma hospital. I told the pilot to go the trauma hospital knowing full well this would be reviewed and I would be fired for violating policy. Fortunately the trauma hospital did a fabulous job and he survived. I was reviewed but not fired. Update/further details. I did not expect so much interest. The policy is closest appropriate facility when the patient had a pulse, that is trauma, neurosurg, burns, pets, etc. But when you lost the pulse the belief was any ed is better than a medic and a nurse in the back of the helicopter. I tend to agree with the philosophy behind the policy. Doing 2-man CPR in the back of helicopter is very difficult and tiring, and we didn't have blood, lab work, etc. I also imagine most areas don't have two vastly different levels of care with just a few minutes difference. The belief is land, go to the ed, have more manpower and more tools. If you get ROSC, get back in the helicopter and keep going. The patient would likely have 2 bills, but that is another story. Our belief was the patient was hypothalamic and needed a cortis and a mass transfusion. Getting emergency release of blood at small hospitals never happens quickly, so the argument would have been we made our decision on time to blood versus time to hospital. We probably would have still been fired, but it was our best chance. Wasn't sure if a girlie's been chasing for months was giving me signals. She needed to do something in my city and wanted to stay the night. I said sure, but didn't have more than 1 bed, so to avoid being creepy I offered to sleep on the couch. She hesitated. I offered to both stay in the bed, and she nodded. Cue 2 hours of lying nervously on my side trying not to come off as a predator, while trying to make small talk. Eventually I realized we had been cuddling for like an hour, and had progressively been getting friendlier and touchier, and at this point I'm just trying to weigh the possibilities she's just unreasonably friendly versus actually into me, and doing this, while trying to be a conversation partner is slowly melting my dumb brain. I figure, I've been single long enough. I lifted her chin and kissed her, giving her plenty of time to recoil and pull away or stop me. She didn't. We've only been together for a bit over 6 months, but she makes me happy. My goal is to make her happy. First time I fast roped out of a helicopter. I was just a photographer. Photographed lots of guys going out the back of aircraft over the years, but never jumped or roped myself. One day I was shooting some folks during a week-long training exercise, and they asked if I wanted to make a go of it. No pressure. The guy in charge even told me the aircraft could easily just land if I didn't feel comfortable. But I figured, if somebody else can do it, so could I. So I got a few days of training on the tower, and then it was off for the flight. I was nervous as hell, even though they told me it was probably just going to be a 20-foot drop. As we got closer, we started counting down the minutes. At 2 minutes out, the door was opened up. 30 seconds and we unhooked and sat on the floor. It was night out and I couldn't see anything, and I was hyped up with nerves and energy, but I also wanted to show myself that I could do it. Remember, the person behind me ate. If you get hurt on the way down, roll to the side as quick as you can, otherwise I'm landing on you, and that'll just suck. And that was it. The person in front of me was out the door, and the crew chief was slapping me on the back. My feet went over the edge, and the only thing I remembered thinking was fuck it. It was pitch black, but I remember thinking it felt like a longer drop than the tower. I hugged the rope close to my chest and kept my feet kicked out, like they told me. Eventually I saw the bottom and landed more or less upright and whole. Even managed to get clear in a few seconds and get video of the next person dropping. Later I found out what was supposed to be a 20-foot top turned into a 50+ foot drop. In the dark I wouldn't have been able to tell, but I'm still proud as hell of myself for doing it. Edit. Well, this blew up. Sitting in a terrible apartment, listening to the upstairs neighbor play fetch with his dog in the house, after waking me up at 4:30 am. I'd been searching for a new apartment, but all I could see was my next bad rental. And so I ended up browsing Zillow and stumbled upon a townhouse in one of my favorite neighborhoods, in my price range, with all the features I wanted. Stared at it for a week, then said frick it, I was going to end up buying a house in a few years, might as well just do it now. Things got kind of chaotic for a few months getting funds sorted, and inspections and packing and moving, but I moved in over a year ago and absolutely love the house. Had been playing guitar for like 6 months before leaving for college. I would walk by a music store every day. After half a semester of walking by the store without thinking about it or planning for it, I actually went in and walked out with a Gibson SG. I've been playing ever since. Are you me? I bought an SG when I found out I had received a really nice scholarship after playing an acoustic for about 9 months. My parents thought I was being irresponsible. Then I got to college and there were like 8 of us with electric guitars, including my roommate. I literally hugged my mom goodbye, went back up the elevator, had a guitar, grabbed mine and joined. An hour later the dorm room was packed with people playing. One of the best purchases I ever made. I currently have 4 guitars, including the SG. Kawaka would love it, but I'm not selling. In the spring of 2017 I was contacted on OkCupid by an Australian woman in her mid-20s while she was in Argentina. She said she liked my profile and that she would be in Texas in 2 weeks and wanted to hang out. I agreed, and then 2 weeks later she stood me up. She messaged me that night and apologized and asked if we could try again. I reluctantly agreed. When we got together we hit it off super well. We talked a lot about her travels. She'd been backpacking around South America for 3 months. She told me about how she hadn't really planned the next part of her trip. She just needed to be in San Francisco in 2 weeks to fly home. She wanted to do a road trip from Texas to California, but didn't realize how expensive it would be, and also didn't know if she'd even be allowed, since she didn't have a US license. Earlier that month I had been talking to a friend in San Francisco that wanted me to come visit. I had been saving for a vacation. I own a truck and a mid/smallish sized travel trailer. Campgrounds are cheaper than hotels, and I was already thinking about making that exact road trip, which I had already done once before 4 years prior. When I told her all of that, she was interested but very skeptical. She told me she only half believed me. I was skeptical too. A few days on the road with someone can turn into a nightmare if you can't connect and have fun together. For all either of us knew, the other was totally crazy point. So our second date I brought a couple maps and a plan. This was apparently sexy and impressive. This seemed to reassure her, and we discussed our hypothetical road trip. We planned on where we would camp and sightsee, and we decided to do it in 5 days, a pretty leisurely pace. After working out the logistics we were both feeling better about the idea, but still unsure. I stored my travel trailer on a ranch in the hill country, about a 2-hour drive from where I live, so I suggested that we drive out there, stay a night, and drive back as a trial run. If all goes well then we would leave a day later and split the travel expenses. The trial run was brilliant, and we were becoming pretty smitten with each other, so we said, frick it, let's travel across the country with someone I just met. The 5-day trip turned into 8 days. We had so much fun we didn't want to say goodbye. After she flew home we kept in touch almost daily for nearly a year. We still chat on occasion to check in with each other, and I have plans on getting an Australian road trip out of her one day.